Hey everybody, welcome to Manna Moments. So this week we are going to be looking at two verses from the book of Acts. We're going to look at Acts 17, verse 24 and 25, and we're going to pull out two truths from those verses. But before we read them, just a little bit of context. The book of Acts was written by Luke. He also wrote the Gospel of Luke. And in this chapter, Luke is sharing with us some words that Paul spoke. Paul was in the city of Athens, not Athens, Georgia. He's not talking to a group of Bulldog fans. He's in Athens, Greece. And Paul is talking to a crowd of idol worshipers. And he's letting them know that they don't need to worship these lifeless gods, that there is a living God. There is one true God who is worthy of their worship. And Paul says these words, Acts 17, verses 24 and 25. And Paul tells them, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and he does not live in temples built by hands, nor is he served by human hands as if he needed anything, for he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else." I love these verses. We could honestly pull out so many different truths from here that we could just spend the rest of the year on it, but there's two things I just want us to grab a hold of, and it's this. We have a never needy God, and we are an ever needy people. And those are both good news. We have a never needy God. Paul kind of starts this off with some broad brushstrokes, like reminding us that our God made the world and everything in it, and he rules. He's sovereign king over everything he has created. And he does not need us to build him a house. He does not need us to serve him. In fact, he does not need us for anything. He has no lack. Need is not a word that is associated with the Creator. He's not a needy God. Our God is absolutely complete. He has no voids. He has no gaps. He has no lack. He is totally, absolutely self-sufficient. God doesn't need anything outside of himself to be himself. In fact, he didn't create because he was lonely or lacking in some way. He didn't create mankind because he needed filling up. He created because it's his nature to overflow. He's a creative God, and to be who he is, he creates. So God is not needy in any way, a never needy God, but we are an ever needy people. We're created in the image of God, but self-sufficiency is not an attribute that he chose for us to share. God designed us to be needy. Honestly, you could say we are deficient by design. And I don't mean we're sinful by design. Sin leads us to be independent of God. God created us with the kind of deficiencies or needs or lacks that make us dependent on him, so that we would turn to him and find all that we need in him. He isn't disillusioned by our lack. He isn't disappointed by our lack. He designed us that way. So we're an ever needy people, and it's easy to see why he's a never needy God is good news, because we'll always find him full. We'll never find him lacking. But it is good to know we're an ever needy people too. It's a freeing truth. I mean, think about it. If we embrace that truth, that God designed us with weaknesses, he designed us to have struggles that lead us to him, that frees us from having to walk in pretense. Like, we can drop the masks. We do not need to pretend like we have no needs, that we have it all together, that we're so self-sufficient. In fact, we can not only drop the mask, we can boast about those weaknesses like Paul did. Paul had this thorn in his flesh that he begged God to take out, and God said, no, that is to keep you from exalting yourself and to show you that my strength will be magnified in your weakness. And so when we've got weaknesses, we don't need to hide them. We can boast about God's greatness in them. It's also a freeing truth because it takes pressure off of us. Like, we never have to think that the success of God's plans depends upon our perfect performance. Like, if we can't mess up, or that might somehow hinder God from from his success. God doesn't need us. And so if we fail, if we fall, if we stumble, if we make a mistake, it doesn't put God in a bind, right? It should make us stop and ask the question, though. Like, if God is a never needy God and we're an ever needy people, why does he command us to serve him? Like, why does Paul say God's not served by human hands and then God commands us to serve him? It's not because we're serving him as if he needed us, right? God doesn't command us to serve because he's lacking. He commands us to serve because he's loving. He invites us to be a part of what he's doing. Like, I think back to when my daughter was maybe 3 years old, and she would want to help me cook in the kitchen. And so I'd be making dinner and I'd invite her to come in and help me. And she'd pull up a chair and I'd give her something to stir in a bowl. And she was honestly helping, right? She was doing something that was contributing toward the dinner I was making. But I didn't ask her to come in because I needed her help to make dinner. In fact, I could have obviously done it easier without the help, as could God do without us. But I wanted the fellowship. I wanted the relationship. I wanted to give her a chance to grow and mature. And that's why God calls us to serve. He doesn't need us, but he delights to use us. And so may we just embrace those two truths. May we celebrate we have a never needy God. May we embrace we are an ever needy people. And may we look to our God for life and breath and everything else. I'll see you next week.